Karen Baker, and this video is all about how to start out with a rotary cutter and 5 questions that lots of people ask to do with rotary cutters. What is it for? What do I need? How do I hold my tools? How do I hold my ruler? How do I get around small spaces? So that's what this video is going to be all about. Full disclosure, the tools that I am using mostly have been provided by Fiskars. I freelance for them at shows, but this is not a video that is sponsored or endorsed by them. This is all about things that I know and I've learnt, and I teach about rotary tools. So whilst it's not an advert for Fiskars, these are the tools that I use, these are the tools that I love. I do have an Alpha tool as well that I had from quite a while back. So this is just to explain why I've got such a lot of Fiskars products in my video, but that's not what it's about. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about rotary tools. What type of tools, whether you want a 60mm tool like this, or whether you're looking at, you've got 45 mils. The millets, the millimeter we're talking about is to do with the size of the blade, not the size of the tool. So whether you are wanting a smaller one, I don't have any of the smaller ones, but you can get little tiny ones that are really useful for little small spaces and other bits of dressmaking. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about lots of different rotary cutters, how to use them, and what are the questions that lots of people ask when they're getting started. So let's go on with the video. So the first thing that we're looking at is, what is it for? What is the point of a rotary cutter? Now this is going to be slightly different whether you are using a rotary cutter for paper crafting, which I'm not really going to be talking about here, or if you are a quilter, or if you are a dressmaker, or maybe you're just using it for home decor items, just general sewing. You would use a rotary cutter to achieve a straight, very crisp cut, or you can use it for curves. So if I was using it for a straight line, I would be doing this. And there we are, have a perfectly straight line. If I wanted to use it for curves, I could do that quite easily. So you can see that in essence, it is a blade tool that is very flexible, and it has a variety of applications depending on the sort of sewing that you're doing. So the second thing we're looking at is, what do I actually need? Well, you're going to need something to cut. And the great thing about a rotary cutter is it is going to, just like scissors, cut a whole variety of different fabrics. Stretch fabrics are particularly good for cutting with rotary cutters, because the beauty of the rotary cutter is you're actually using pressure to push the blade through the fabric, and because you're putting pressure down on the fabric, there's less likelihood of it slipping or moving, and the cut is very directional and pretty smooth. So with scissors, sometimes it's easy to stretch the fabric, or it's easy for the fabric to move, particularly if you're dealing with slippery fabrics or very lightweight fabrics. So one of the advantages of this is it holds your fabric as you're moving, so you get less slippage, and you've often, people using these for these types of fabric feel that they have more control with them. It's fine for cotton, for rib, for felted fabrics. Yeah, they will cut leather. You have to be a little bit careful depending on how thick leather. It depends on the clearance between the end of your tool and the edge of the blade. But most things that you would choose to be cutting with leather-wise, you will be able to get through with a rotary cutter. Again, we've looked at stretch. We'll do denim. You can cut wadding, quilting, batting with it. The only thing is, sometimes depending on what type of wadding you use, it will blunt your blades a little more quickly than you're expecting. So you have to keep that in mind. Linen, cotton, anything that your scissors can cut within reason, you can cut with your rotary cutter. So you're going to need fabric. You're obviously going to need a tool, whatever tool you're going to choose, and you will need a self-healing mat. It's not okay to get your wooden cutting board from the kitchen, nor your plastic cutting board. People have come when I've been doing shows and they've said, oh, I used this and I found that my blades were blunting quite quickly. Well, they will. If you put your blade into wood, it's going to blunt quite quickly, and it's also going to make a nasty mark in your wooden boards as well. So get something that is the right tool for the job, and depending on what type of fabric or style or type of project you're doing, it will also depend on the size of the mat that you need. So for instance, if you were just cutting patchwork, you might find a board that is not too big. I mean, this is quite a large one. This is a 13 by 13. You might find a rotating board is actually really helpful for you, particularly if you're doing shape pieces like triangles, because you can actually move this rather than having to actually move your way around the table. But if you were choosing to make your dressmaking, it's unlikely that the size of this board is going to be suitable for you. If you're doing quilting, then you're probably going to need a larger mat. This sort of mat is possibly okay if you're starting, but you're going to struggle with this sort of mat. The sort of size of mat, let's have a look, that I would recommend for quilting, sorry, I'm just bashing the camera there, would be something like this one, which is a 24 by 18. That's the sort of size, because if you've got a long 24-inch ruler on here, it's going to be able to fit. You can, of course, use your mats diagonally. If you are using it for fashion fabrics, you're a dress maker, you're a tailor, you're going to need an A1, perhaps two of those, or preferably an A0. If you're just doing baby stuff, then a smaller one is going to be absolutely fine for you. But invest, if you're going to do a lot of it, invest in a quality mat, because mats are consumables, just like the blades on your rotary cutter. You are going to have to replace them eventually. And take good care of them. If you have a self-healing mat, don't put it in view of sunshine so that it gets hot, because it will warp it. If you're going somewhere, don't leave it in the back of your car for long periods of time. Don't lean it up against a radiator. Sometimes the easiest way of storing these things, because they're a little bit bendy, is to try and store them flat under a table, under a sofa, if you haven't got the luxury of having it permanently out on top of a table. So that's the basics. The other thing that you are going to need if you are a quilter, and even if you're not, you are going to need some sort of ruler. Now, excuse the glare. It's reflecting, the light's reflecting off these. There's all sorts of different rulers you can get, and depending on what you're wanting to do will depend on the sort of ruler. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but the main thing about a quilting ruler, if you're using it with your rotary cutting tool, is the depth of the ruler. If I put my fingers there, you might be able to just see. It's not like an ordinary ruler. Lots of people, when I meet them at shows, come to me and say, oh, can I just use an ordinary ruler? My answer to that would be, well, yes, you can, but safely, no, don't do that. Use something that has enough of a lip, because when we're actually cutting, what we don't want to do is have something that it's very easy for the blade to come over the edge and towards your fingers. It's all about safety with rotary cutting tools. So you could do the ruler, even if you're a dressmaker and you're just cutting little, say you're cutting baby wear, it's worth having some sort of ruler, whether it's an acrylic ruler or whether it's a substantial ruler. You can get rulers, the metallic ones with sort of sloped sides. Those, if you haven't got something like this, are actually a good substitute. But there will be points where you need a straight line, and I really would recommend getting something that is safe and fit for purpose. So you're going to need some sort of ruler. If you're a quilter, you're definitely going to need rulers. And then the other thing that you may want to do, depending on the sorts of cutting you're going to do is pattern weights. And particularly if you're dressmaking, pattern weights, these ones I made very, very simply. I'll have to do a video on how to do these, very, very easy. But if you haven't got something like these pattern weights, then just use cans from the kitchen. You know, a couple of these around. The whole point of having pattern weights is not only to weight your fabric down to stop it moving, it's also so that you don't have to use your fabric and your fingers close to the edge. So if I get a piece of fabric, so if I had that and I'd got my, say, my pattern coming along the top of it, if I wanted to cut, now I would then have to really, I'd have to have my fingers fairly close to make sure that the fabric, well, you would iron this first, obviously, but I'd want to keep my fingers fairly close to make sure that it was following the lines. That is just dangerous. So if I have my pattern weights, let me get my other makeshift pattern weight, it means that I can easily follow the line of the pattern without needing my fingers to be anywhere near it. So those are all the basics, what you're actually going to need. Number 3 is, how do I hold my tool? It may seem like a really obvious thing, but actually it isn't always, depending on what sort of tool you have. If we look at the traditional sort of stick type tools, if we move these here, you're going to be able to use them easily whether you're right or left-handed. There are things that we need to do to certain tools if you're right-handed or if you're left-handed. But with these ones, if you're left-handed, you're going to pick them up and you're going to have the blade facing away from your hand. If you're right-handed, you're going to be holding the blade like this. The secret with rotary cutting is that you always need to be able to see the blade. So if I was holding it as a right-handed person, if I put it like that, I cannot see now the edge of the blade, so I can't see exactly where it's going. So that's always, depending on which hand that you're using, you need to be able to see the blade, and that helps sort of make sense to a lot of people who are struggling with how to use different tools. I will come on to right and left-handed in another video, but I'm left-handed, so I'm going to look at this side. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to hold it so that you've got one finger, your index finger, on the top, your thumb holding it like this, your fingers just clasping around that, so this is in the middle of your palm. And the reason we want it like this is because your finger is able to put the pressure on, and this is the most comfortable way of holding your tool. And the idea is that you're pushing down and forwards. That's the idea of the tool, down and forwards. So that's how we would hold that type of tool. And the same is going to be, if you're right-handed, you're going to put in your index finger on the top there. You can see it's got little bumpy ridges there. Your thumb on the side of the tool and the rest of it holding it forwards. It's exactly the same for this one here. You're going to be holding it exactly the same. Now, there are different types of rotary cutter that will change slightly the way you use it. So with this tool, you're going to grip inside the handle and you can hold it like that. Or the best way of doing it is to use your finger. Sorry, I'm really struggling to hold it because I'm a lefty. It doesn't make sense to me. So you would hold it like this. Now I know I've got the blade on the wrong side, but I'm just, for purposes, I'm just showing you. So you're going to grab it like this and you're going to put your finger on like that. You would pull the lever forward and then you're going to do. So it's very similar, but the way the holding position is a little bit more molded towards the shape of your hands. So that's how you would use that one. Some people prefer to use it with the thumb on the top. It depends which is the most comfortable for you, but you do need part of your hand to fit on the top, and you've got that little bit there where you would just rest your finger. Now a different one, the trigger type, again, very similar. You can either hold it like that, or it's easier to hold with your index finger if you're used to holding the stick ones. So I would tend to use my rotary cutter like that, but that's fine if you prefer. A lot of it is about feeling confident with your tool. And the other type of tool, which is different completely, is this one here, which is designed to use the least pressure of all of the tools. And it's particularly good if you have issues with grip, and with arthritis, with carpal tunnel syndrome, repetitive strain injury, that sort of stuff. And if you're struggling, particularly sort of if you've got shoulder issues, this is sometimes much more comfortable. You grip it like this, and you're going to use the weight of your arm to push down. So you're literally using the natural weight of your arm as you're pressing down in order to push forward, assuming that my blade was actually out. So those are the different ways of holding the tool. Number 4 is, how do I hold my ruler? Now you might think that this is an incredibly stupid thing to talk about, but actually this is one of the main reasons, particularly in quilting, why people struggle with this, and sometimes why people actually hurt themselves, because they haven't got enough of a grip on the ruler, or they haven't got a decent understanding of where they're supposed to be lining their tool up in relation to the ruler. So I am gonna have to show you this as a lefty. If you were doing it as a right-handed person, you'd be doing it the opposite way around. Now, if I was cutting a piece of fabric, let me just find a piece of fabric here. And we'll talk about this in another video about getting good cuts, how to problem solve if you're struggling with your rotary cutting. But if we were doing this, we would want to get a good cut first. If you're new to rotary cutting, don't go and try cutting out pattern pieces straight away. You want to get yourself familiarized with the tool first. So if I was using a rotary cutter, and I'm just trying to find the one that I normally use, which usefully isn't here. Okay, I'll just use stick one for now. Okay, so the reason that I couldn't find it is because the one that I've got here is set up for a right-handed person. So, oh, it's here, just found it. Okay. Right, so we've got our tool. Now, ordinarily, if we were cutting and we were doing a cut for quilting, we would not be using it this way. But all I'm doing for the moment is I'm just showing you how to get a cut and a nice, clean and safe cut with your rotary cutter. So having the ruler, your hand position is quite important because we need to stabilize both the ruler and the fabric underneath. If you don't have much of a grip on here and you start cutting, sometimes what happens is your ruler starts to slip, and that way you end up with wasted fabric, and it's actually quite annoying. So 2 ways of doing it. Either like this, so that you've got all of your weight on like that, or you can put the flat of your hand, but you can see where my thumb is now, tuck your thumb underneath. So if for any reason you're not watching, and you always should be, but if you sort of don't work out your cut properly and you end up mounting the ruler, the first thing that hits is the ruler, the blade hits the ruler and not your finger. So tuck that in. So whatever is most comfortable for you. There are extra things that we can talk about, and that I will talk about in another video about gloves and about handles for this, but we're just doing the very basics in this video, so we're not going to cover those in this video. I'll be doing another one shortly. So I've got my hand on here. I do need to actually press down slightly. Now, the best thing to get good cuts time after time is good positioning. So what I would want to do is I would want to bring, let me just cut a little bit like that, bring my ruler and I bring it in at an angle. Now the reason that I'm doing this is I am skimming the very edge of my cutting mat. I'm not actually cutting into it, I'm not scraping it across, I'm literally skimming it. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I will immediately know that I've come next to my ruler. Now the reason that this is important is lots of people, and I've seen it countless times at shows and when I've been teaching, is that people come and they put their blade where they think the edge of the ruler is. Because more often than not, these rulers are transparent, they end up actually starting on the ruler, and then they end up either veering off, chipping a little bit of their acrylic ruler or even their blade, or worse, they end up veering towards the hand. So if I have got my ruler, ruler stabilized and my tool, bring it in at an angle. Once I know I've hit the edge of the ruler, then I'm just going to straighten it up. Now I know that when I push forwards, you're going to be pushing along the ruler. You don't want to be trying to follow the pattern, follow anything else. You're just following with your eye the line of the ruler. So I need to have plenty of pressure so that my ruler doesn't move, and I'm just going to push. So for ease, because I realise that lots of people are visual learners, I will do it as if I was using it as somebody who is right-handed, because I know that's the majority of you watching. So I've got my piece of fabric. My fabric is going to be extending out this way, and then I'm going to take my tool in at an angle, skimming the edge till I get to the edge of my ruler. I can feel that's the edge of my ruler. Now I straighten up. Now I've got my hand position, and now I'm going to cut. So that hopefully gives you an idea of what it looks like as far as using it in a right hand. Now you can see where my tool is and where my fabric is. I'm not starting on the edge of the fabric, because that's one thing that lots of people do. And then because the blade is rotating downwards, if you put it often at the edge of the piece of fabric, when you push down, you will actually miss the first few millimeters of your fabric. So then what you tend to find is people doing this, or they go back and they start sawing away. It's just not good. The idea with using a rotary tool is that it's going to make your life easier, not more complicated. So the other thing that we need to talk about while we're here and about positioning is safety. Always, always away from you. There'll be times when you need to cut maybe at this angle, depending on what you're doing, if you're going around the top of a ruler or something like that, or you have a curve, but away, sideways is fine. Both ways, depending on which way you're doing it. Like this is a bad idea safety-wise, because some people get a bit gung-ho, quite quick, towards yourself, you'll end up nicking your tummy if you're not careful. So always, always away from yourself for safety. So we've got our hand on the ruler, we're lining up our tool, take it in there, straighten it up, and then we're just going to push forwards. Okay? And we've got a nice clean cut. Now, this is what happens with lots of people. At this point then, they put the tool down, they go to change their position with the ruler, and if you're not careful and you're not really watching what you're doing, people end up nicking themselves. So the really, really important tip for safety is get into the habit of always retracting your blade as soon as you have finished. If you do it a couple of times, it will become second nature, and it's really, really safe. Because another issue is often blades are left out, so fabrics tend to get piled up on top of them, and you forget that your blade is out, and that's often how people end up hurting themselves. So safety first, always get into a good habit of retracting your blade after every cut. It doesn't matter if I'm only doing a quick rearrangement, I always retract my blade. The phone could ring, someone could rush in, and then we'll forget it's out. So just get used to it. It's not a great deal. It's saved, it's seconds we're talking about here, on and off. So that's our basic, how do I hold my ruler? So the last thing that lots of people ask about with rotary cutters is, how do I go around small areas? Now the answer would be actually to use the smallest blade possible. There are smaller blades than this that you can get. I don't actually have any of the smaller ones to show you because I just don't use them. But if you're doing intricate patterns, particularly if you have something with a lot of curves and they're quite tight curves, if I show you here, I am actually going to struggle to get around a really small curve because the fabric will start moving around. If I want decent small curves, I want to get a small tool. And the main thing to say about going around curves and general usage of rotary tools is it does take a little bit of practice. People, I think, because they're used to scissors, often assume that it will be a very natural transition to a rotary tool. For some people it is, they get on really, really well with them. For other people it isn't. And that, I think, is my last tip to leave you with for the end of this video. Is that actually the answer for you may be that you don't need a rotary tool. And people have been using scissors for centuries. And people get extremely good results, whether it's dressmakers or even quilters. They get really good results with scissors. I mean, it might be that you actually need to draw lines, particularly with quilting, but for some people they just prefer scissors. So, lots of people have come and asked me, oh, I've seen people using rotary cutters, do I need a rotary cutter? And we've talked about it, and when we talked about the fact that particularly if you're a dressmaker, you do need very large mats and you need to replace the blades regularly, because that's what you need to do. I'm going to do a video on that one shortly. People get to the conclusion that actually they're quite happy with scissors and they do not need to use a rotary cutter. If you're doing lots of stretch fabrics or silks, or you're doing quilting where you want to cut multiple layers, that is one of the bonuses of a rotary cutter tool, is that you can do multiple layers of fabric with much less strain on your hands and wear and tear than you would using scissors. So that is the advantage of a rotary cutter over scissors. The other advantage is that people like to feel that they actually have control. However, there are lots of people that say they feel that they have perfect control with their scissors, and this is not necessary. So if you're thinking about getting a rotary cutting tool and you're not sure whether it's for you, then you can actually get one. They're not expensive, and you can get a small mat fairly inexpensively as well, and you can try it out. If you're wanting to take the plunge as a dressmaker and you're wanting to invest in a very large mat, which are, they're a considered purchase, then it may be worth seeing if you can go and try one out. Ask a friend if you can borrow their equipment just to see if the tool is for you. I use scissors and I use a rotary cutter. Even if you choose a rotary cutter, you are still going to need a decent pair of scissors, because particularly if you're a dressmaker, you'll have a job getting accurate notches with one of these. The smaller ones perhaps, but it's still something. I would still cut notches with scissors. There will be some things that you want to do that you still need scissors for. So rotary cutters are not instead of scissors, they tend to be used alongside scissors. So I hope this has given you a bit of an idea about what the rotary cutter is for, when you might choose to use one, and the different types of rotary cutter there are. Do subscribe to my channel if you want more information about all sorts of different sewing ideas, and also look out for the next in the series about rotary tools. Thanks for watching. Bye.